Imagine waking up one morning to find your tranquil haven transformed into a parking lot overnight. A scene so surreal, it feels like a cruel prank played by the universe itself. My land, my sanctuary, was suddenly marred by rows of cars, SUVs, and even a golf cart as if my field had overnight become the newest country club parking lot. I had purchased this piece of paradise for privacy, for freedom, for peace. No HOA, no absurd regulations, no one dictating the terms of my existence. That was the dream until one fateful morning when reality took a sharp, unwelcome turn. There it was in the heart of my front field, a bright blue HOA designated parking sign staked into the earth, like a declaration of war. I stood there staring, trying to process the audacity of it all. This wasn't just an accidental overstep, it was a deliberate invasion. My heart pounded as I walked over the sign, beckoning like a challenge. With a deep breath, I yanked it from the ground, the soil yielding with a satisfying give. Then I approached a car, its windows tinted against the morning sun. Knocking on the glass, I waited. The window rolled down to reveal a middle-aged woman, her face a mask of entitlement, her sunglasses lowered as if to say, "How dare you?" "Excuse me," she said, her tone dripping with annoyance, as though I were the intruder in the scenario. I gestured broadly at the land around us, my voice firm, yet quivering with the weight of my resolve. "This is my property." I declared, the words echoing across the field, marking the beginning of a battle I had not anticipated, but was now fully prepared to wage. My heart sank as I stared at the sea of cars before me. "Oh no," I murmured to myself. "This is HOA overflow parking." My jaw clenched in disbelief. "No," I declared, my voice steady yet quivering with a mix of anger and determination. "This is my land." The woman, looking genuinely irritated, retorted with a frown. "Well, I was told homeowners could park here if the clubhouse lot was full." I forced a smile, my irritation growing. "Told by whom?" I questioned, my voice laced with skepticism. She shrugged nonchalantly. "The HOA." Now, not only was I irritated, I was seething with fury. As I walked the perimeter of my property, attempting to assess the extent of the intrusion, my heart sank further. It wasn't merely about parking. People were treating my land like a public thoroughfare, a worn dirt trail marked where cars had brazenly driven across my fields. Joggers were casually trotting along my private pathways. And then the sight that truly set my blood to boil, a family oblivious to the sanctity of my land, was having a picnic right in the middle of it. They had unfolded chairs, spread out a full picnic basket, and even brought a cooler, as if this were some kind of communal park. I stormed over, struggling to keep my temper in check. "Hey!" I called out, my voice sharp. "You realize you're trespassing, right?" A man wearing an HOA-branded polo looked up from his sandwich with an air of nonchalance. "Oh," he said, as if I had just commented on the weather. I crossed my arms, my stance firm. "This isn't public property," I asserted. He sighed, clearly annoyed by my interruption. "Well, technically, this land has been used by the community for years," he explained, his tone dripping with condescension. I narrowed my eyes. "Used, yes," I retorted, "but that does not make it yours." He gave me that fake condescending HOA smile. "The neighborhood has always enjoyed this space. It's an established common area." Common area. They had been using my land for so long they actually believed they owned it. That's when I noticed another sign, a printed map tacked onto a wooden post, a neighborhood map distributed by the HOA to new homeowners. And guess what was labeled as a community green space? My land. In an instant, I seized the sign from its post and brandished it before me, my voice a controlled storm. "This," I declared, "is not your HOA's territory." The man, whose face betrayed only a flicker of concern, shrugged nonchalantly. "You might want to take that up with the board," he suggested with a tone as dismissive as his demeanor. Oh, I intended to do just that, for these people had not only laid claim to my land, but had gone so far as to produce maps, erect signs, and dupe homeowners into believing it was communal property. The HOA, they hadn't even had the courtesy to seek permission. But that was about to shift drastically. This was merely the opening act. No time was squandered. Upon spotting my land mislabeled as community green space on an ostensibly official HOA map, I knew my path was clear. I was heading straight for Karen. No phone calls, no delays. I wanted to witness the shock on her face when I slammed that sign onto her desk. The HOA office nestled within the community clubhouse, a structure as soulless and imposing as a bureaucratic fortress, seemed designed to leech the joy out of any social gathering. I strode past a handful of board members, their expressions as bland as their policies, and approached the front desk. The receptionist, barely acknowledging my presence, sighed, her gum chewing a slow, disinterested rhythm. "I need to speak with Karen," I demanded. She nodded lethargically towards a glass-walled office. There she was, Karen, the self-proclaimed monarch of the HOA, ensconced behind a desk that was an affront to modesty with its sheer size. The walls behind her were a gallery of her vanity, adorned with framed photos from various HOA events, ribbon cuttings, fundraisers, and that insufferable Community Leader of the Year award. She had constructed a temple to her own ego, and now she was about to face a reckoning. Without so much as a knock, I entered, dropping the HOA map and the parking sign onto her desk with a thud. Karen, in her fortress of self-adulation, barely reacted. She sat there, her hands folded neatly on the desk, offering me a tight, practiced smile. "Ah," she said, as if my arrival was the most anticipated event on her calendar, just another routine meeting. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" she asked, her voice dripping with feigned interest. I gestured towards the map spread out before us, my voice tinged with a mix of frustration and disbelief. "You want to explain why my private property is suddenly labeled as community green space?" Karen barely spared it a glance, then sighed with an air of exaggerated patience, shaking her head. "Oh, that," she said dismissively. "There's no need to get upset. This is all just a colossal misunderstanding." I crossed my arms, my patience fraying. "A misunderstanding?" "Yes," she nodded, tilting her head slightly as if to soften the blow of her words. "You see, Oak Ridge Estates has always used that land for recreational purposes. It's been an informal community space for years. The homeowners simply assumed—" I cut her off, my voice sharp as a knife. "Assumed," I repeated, incredulity lacing my tone. Karen nodded, her smile unwavering, her voice sweet yet venomous. "Yes, you see, Oak Ridge Estates has always used that land for recreational purposes. It's been an informal community space for years. The homeowners simply assumed—" I cut her off, my voice sharp as a knife. "Assumed," I repeated, incredulity lacing my tone. She continued, "Well, technically that's debatable." My jaw clenched at her audacity. Debatable. With a flourish, she reached into her desk drawer, pulling out a thick binder, flipping through pages marked with color-coded tabs. Stopping on a specific page, she said smoothly, "There's something called prescriptive easement. It applies when a property has been used by the public for an extended period. Since the HOA has maintained and enjoyed access to that land for years, the board has the right to request an easement review." I stared at her, my mind racing. She had come prepared, armed with legal jargon and nonsensical loopholes, hoping I'd either be intimidated or bewildered. But to her misfortune, I wasn't about to be fooled. Leaning forward, I planted my hands firmly on her desk, my eyes locked on hers. "Karen," I began, my voice low and steady, "let's be absolutely clear. That is my land. It's not part of the HOA, nor has it ever been. Your assumptions mean absolutely nothing." My voice was low, a soft undercurrent that made her shift uncomfortably in her chair. "A prescriptive easement," I began, my tone measured yet firm, "requires an official claim, a court ruling, and years of uncontested use. And even then, it doesn't transfer ownership." Her smile wavered, a fleeting moment of vulnerability, before she regained her composure, flipping to another tab in her binder. "Well," she continued, her voice smooth as silk, "I understand this must be frustrating for you, but the reality is the community has an established history of using that land. It's only fair that everyone continues to benefit." "Fair?" She actually said fair. I let out a slow breath, forcing myself to remain composed. "Fair?" I echoed, my head shaking in disbelief. Fair would have been asking for permission before planting signs and claiming my land. Fair would have been not engaging in trespassing and fraud. Karen sighed, her exasperation palpable, as if I were the one being unreasonable. "Look," she said, her voice dipped in condescension, "this doesn't have to be a fight. If you're open to negotiation, I'm sure the board would be willing to discuss compensation for shared community access." Compensation? She was suggesting I rent out my own land to an HOA I didn't even belong to. A slow, humorless laugh escaped me. Karen's smile faltered once more, her confidence shaken. "Oh, Karen," I said, shaking my head, "you really don't get it, do you?" She straightened in her seat, her expression hardening like ice. "There's no need to be difficult," she retorted, the fake kindness dropping from her tone. "Oh, I'm not being difficult," I countered, rising to my feet. "I'm shutting this down." I turned to leave, but her voice, cool and composed, stopped me in my tracks. "You should know," she said, "the board has already approved an assessment of your property for community use. If you refuse—" As I turned away, the thinly veiled threat hung in the air like a noxious cloud. With a slow, amused smile, I stepped closer. My voice steady, yet infused with a hint of mockery. "Go ahead, Karen. Take all the legal action you desire. And when you do, I'll ensure the court sees this fraudulent map, those fake barking signs, and every single letter your HOA has ever sent me." Her expression tightened, the facade of composure cracking under the pressure. "You wouldn't want to make this difficult for yourself." She ventured one last time, her voice tinged with desperation. I exhaled slowly, then leaned in, my voice calm yet firm. "Karen, I don't think you understand what difficult truly means, but you're about to find out." With that, I walked out, leaving her in a storm of her own making. Karen was not just entitled, she was dangerous, and I had an inkling she was on the brink of an even graver mistake. She detested being challenged. For years, she had bullied homeowners, bent rules, and wielded her fake authority like a weapon. Now she had encountered someone who wouldn't bow down. She couldn't intimidate me, she couldn't manipulate me into questioning my own reality. So she did what all power-hungry HOA dictators do when cornered. She escalated, and she did it with all her might. The first sign of her escalation was the letter arriving in a thick, official-looking envelope, emblazoned with the seal of the Oak Ridge Estates HOA Legal Department. Let's get one thing straight, there was no real legal department. I opened it, skimmed the first page, and burst into laughter. Karen was doubling down on her delusion. Final notice. It read, "You are in violation of Oak Ridge Estates HOA community access policies. Failure to comply will result in legal action, including but not limited to fines, liens, or proper assessment liens." The absurdity was almost theatrical. Karen, with an audacity that left me astounded, was threatening to impose a lien on my private HOA free land. The sheer gall of it, I flipped the page only to find an absurd list of fines: $500 for supposedly blocking public access, $750 for failing to meet the HOA's aesthetic whims, and a staggering $11,000 for allegedly disrupting the community's functionality, a community I wasn't even part of. I tossed those preposterous papers onto my kitchen table, shaking my head in disbelief. Karen wasn't merely trying to frighten me anymore. She was concocting a case, a completely fabricated one, but a case nonetheless. If I had been anyone else, someone less versed in the law, I might have trembled at her threats. But oh, Karen was about to learn the depth of her miscalculation. I chose to ignore her letter, didn't call, didn't respond, and that silence that drove her mad. 2 days later, she sent her so-called enforcers. One morning, as I stepped outside, I was greeted by the sight of 4 HOA board members lurking at the edge of my driveway. They stood there, not on my land yet, but close enough to watch to wait. I leaned against my truck, coffee in hand, and greeted them with a light voice. "Morning. Something I can help you with?" The tallest one, a man in khakis sporting a golf visor, cleared his throat, his voice carrying the weight of assumed authority. "We're here on behalf of Oak Ridge Estates to discuss your ongoing violations concerning community accessibility," he began. I sighed, raising a hand to halt him. "Let me stop you right there. I'm not in your HOA. You have no jurisdiction over my land. We're done here." Karen's second in command, a woman clutching a clipboard with an air of superiority, stepped forward, her smile condescending, as if she were explaining basic arithmetic to a child. "That's where you're mistaken," she said. "The HOA has a long-standing history of my land, my legacy, my rights, yet here we are, the board's unanimous decision casting a shadow over my homestead. They voted to assess my property for community use." Assess my property. I echoed, my eyebrow arching in disbelief. She confirmed with a curt nod, her demeanor icy. "Since you've made it abundantly clear that you do not wish to cooperate, She continued, her voice a thin veneer of professionalism. We'll be moving forward with an easement review. An easement review. The audacity, they were attempting to pilfer my land through the twisted pathways of legal loopholes. I smiled, but it was not a smile of warmth or friendliness. It was the cold, knowing grin of a man who knew his ground. Good luck with that, I said, turning on my heel towards my truck, leaving her with her own cold calculations. But Karen's second in command wasn't finished. If you refuse to comply, she interjected, her voice now edged with impatience, we will have no choice but to escalate legal actions. I paused, turning back to face her. You mean more of your fabricated legal notices, more of your concocted fines? I shook my head, my voice laced with incredulity. You must truly be out of your minds. Her face flushed with anger. This is a formal warning, she managed to say, her tone sharpening. Let me give you a warning. I stepped forward just enough to make her retreat instinctively. If I catch a single one of you setting foot on my land again, I will press trespassing charges. No warnings, no second chances. You have no claim here. None. The board members exchanged nervous glances. They knew as well as I did that this was not a threat, it was a promise. Karen had underestimated me, thinking she could wear me down with her bullying tactics, scare me into submission. Little did she know she had picked a fight she was destined to lose. 2 days later, Karen escalated again, this time committing her gravest error. She had already thrown at me every trick in her playbook, phony fines, fabricated violations, and even sent her cronies to intimidate me on my own soil. When all else failed, she did something so flagrantly illegal, I had to read it twice to believe she would stoop so low. She sold. As the dawn broke over Oak Ridge Estates, the tranquility of my morning routine was shattered by a voicemail. A real estate agent named Greg, with a voice brimming with cheer, left a message. Hi there, I just wanted to follow up on your interest in purchasing a premium lot in Oak Ridge Estates. Let me know if you'd like a tour of the available properties. Puzzled, I hit redial and got Greg on the line. Yeah, hey, I think there's been a mistake, I said, my voice edged with confusion. You left me a message about a property in Oak Ridge Estates. Oh, yes, Greg exclaimed, his excitement palpable through the phone. Are you interested in purchasing a premium lot? We still have a few with exclusive community amenities. I rubbed my temples, a headache brewing. I already own land here, I stated, trying to keep my voice calm. Greg paused, his enthusiasm faltering. You do? Yep, I took a deep breath. And last I checked, my land isn't for sale. Greg let out a nervous chuckle, the sound grating against my growing frustration. Well, sir, I'm not sure what you mean. The HOA listed several lots as part of their expanded recreational space, all with deeded homeowner access. I sat up straight, my jaw clenching. Deed access, Greg, where exactly is this expanded recreational space located? There was a hesitation followed by the rustling of papers. Then as Greg read the address out loud, my heart sank. It was my property. The audacity of the HOA to advertise my land as part of their private community amenities sent a jolt through me. I opened my laptop, fingers trembling as I began to dig, and what I discovered next made my blood boil. The HOA's official website now boasted a new section for prospective buyers, proudly proclaiming, Oak Ridge Estates is proud to offer exclusive private trails, community event space, and premium green space available to all residents. Next to this bold declaration, a map pinpointed the exact location of my land. How could they, what right did they have? The betrayal felt like a personal affront, a theft not just of land but of my peace, my sanctuary. As I pored over the digital map, my land marked in the hues of the HOA, each click through the pages unveiled more of their audacity. There it was, a welcome packet for the newcomers, branding my property as Oak Ridge Private Trails. They had brazenly sold memberships for access, including images of my serene fields in their promotional brochures. This wasn't just about trespassers or entitlement. This was outright fraud. Karen hadn't merely deceived me. She had turned my land into a profit-making venture, convincing dozens of new homeowners that they were entitled to roam my private sanctuary as part of their HOA fees. Oh, the proof I held could ignite a firestorm. But before I could even consult a lawyer, Karen committed her gravest error yet. Imagine my shock stepping out the next day to find workers on my land, not just passing through but actively transforming it. One on a riding mower slicing through the grass with the precision of a surgeon, another erecting a wooden signpost. The sign read, Welcome to Oak Ridge Private Trails, HOA members only. This was beyond an abuse of power. It was criminal. Karen, in her boundless audacity, had not only trespassed and harassed with her fictitious legal threats, but she had also sold access to my land, deceived new residents into thinking it was an HOA amenity, and now sent workers to landscape it as if it were her own. With more than enough evidence to dismantle her schemes legally, I first needed to ensure she would never again set foot on my land. Thus I did what any landowner in my shoes would do. I built a fence. Not just any fence, but a formidable barrier, a declaration of my rights and a safeguard of my solitude. I called in a contractor. I trusted someone with the skills to erect not just any barrier, but a fortress. I demanded heavy-duty industrial-grade fencing, complete with reinforced steel posts, anti-climb panels, and motion-activated security cameras. My resolve was firm. This was more than just property protection. It was a declaration of autonomy. I meticulously mapped out every single access point the HOA had exploited, the dirt paths they trampled, the makeshift parking spots they claimed, even the gaps in my tree line where they brazenly cut through. With precision, I sealed them all. No path, no entry, no loophole left unaddressed. I even rerouted my driveway gate, ensuring the only entrance to my land was through my private access road. By the time the fence was finished, the HOA was effectively trapped, their overreach curtailed. No more shortcuts across my land, no more impromptu picnic areas, no more HOA private trails. The very next day, I stood by my porch, savoring my coffee, waiting. And sure enough, Karen arrived, storming up to the fence, flanked by two HOA board members, her arms flailing, her face flushed with fury. I remained silent, watching her meltdown unfold. "What is this?" she shrieked, shaking the fence with all her might. "You can't do this." I took another slow, deliberate sip of my coffee. "This," I gestured to the towering steel fence, "is my private property and you're trespassing." Karen's response was explosive, her voice rising to a crescendo. "You are interfering with community access. You are obstructing the homeowner's rights to—" I cut her off, my voice calm and steady. "This land was never yours," I said, "and now it never will be." She opened her mouth to argue, but I was far from done. From my pocket, I produced a thick folder, thick with documents that spelled out the end of their overreach. I flipped open the cease and desist order, its pages crackling with the weight of justice. There on the signature page, my lawyer's stamp of approval glared back at me. With a mix of defiance and relief, I thrust it towards Karen, declaring, "You're being sued." Her face blanched, her eyes widening in shock. The board members behind her squirmed in their seats, suddenly aware that this was no longer just a petty squabble over property lines. This was a full-blown lawsuit. As I filed that lawsuit, the dominoes began to fall. The investigation that ensued was like watching a house of cards collapse. Karen, who had ruled the neighborhood with an iron fist, bullying homeowners and acting as if she were beyond reproach, now faced her reckoning. Her empire crumbled in an instant. The investigation unearthed a staggering web of deceit Karen had siphoned off thousands from HOA funds, her hands dipping into the community's coffers as if they were her personal piggy bank. She had forged signatures, crafting fake property agreements with the ease of a seasoned con artist. She had deceived homeowners, selling them access to land she didn't own all, while keeping meticulous records of her treachery. Once the homeowners realized the extent of Karen's duplicity, the backlash was swift and merciless. More lawsuits followed, each one a nail in the coffin of her once unassailable authority. The HOA board, unable to withstand the pressure, dissolved within weeks. Karen, who had once reveled in her power, now faced the loss of everything: her position, her reputation, her freedom. The court's hammer fell with a resounding thud, ordering restitution for her fraud, charging her criminally. And when the judge pronounced her sentence, it was not a mere fine or probation. No, for Karen, it was prison time. The same Karen who had wielded legal threats like a weapon against others for breaking HOA rules was now behind bars. The HOA, once a shadow over our lives, was no more. No more arbitrary fines, no more oppressive rules, no more entitled Karen. I left that courtroom a free man, unburdened by the harassment that had plagued our community. Now every time I pass her old house, standing empty and silent, I feel a wave of peace wash over me. Her name, once synonymous with tyranny, is now just a whisper in the wind, a reminder of what once was but is no more. With each HOA record, an irrepressible grin spreads across my face, for I triumphed in the end. Thank you from the depths of my heart for joining me on this journey. Your support means the world. Please take a moment to comment, like, share, or even subscribe to our channel, and let's continue this story together.